All right, Billy, we're going to start this with the facts and the facts alone.
Feels like a good spot.
From what we understand, Zadina wanted out.
Yep.
Yzerman was willing to provide that. Yzerman tried to shop Zadina around the league. It is very clear that Yzerman was unable to find any deal that he was okay with. That probably led to a conversation between Yzerman and Zadina.
I'm with you.
All we know is it led to Zadina being waived. I think we were all under the assumption, I especially believe Zadina was under the assumption that at least one team was going to be happy to bring him in for free at a very manageable contract of 1.8 mil. That turned out not to be the case, as Zadina, as of today, has cleared waivers, is still within the organization, and not a single team was willing to pick him up for nothing.
Yeah, and it all kind of stems from kind of his stats. I don't want to say that stats just determine a player by any means, because I would like to preface it with when Zadina first came into this league, he came in kind of hot, a lot of hype behind him, he played fast, he played decently, but what you really noticed out of him was that he just kind of floated around the ice. He wasn't really going for pucks, he wasn't trying to make anything happen, and I gave him all the credit in the world going into, I believe, his second full-time season. It felt like he just got stronger. He started going into the boards for pucks. He was trying to make things happen. You saw a big jump in his game. And since that jump, it's just been kind of stagnant. I'm not going to say he went back to just floating around, but it does kind of feel like he is have someone else create a play, and I might be able to put the puck in the net. Before he was playing professionally, anything like that, he was hyped up for his goal scoring. That's why we signed him. We knew that we needed goal scoring at the sixth overall pick. That's what we drafted him for. And in 190 games, he has 28 goals. That's pretty inexcusable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that the Zadina trade request came in before the draft.
Yep.
And the reason why I think that's interesting to note is because I feel like it would have been pretty, I shouldn't say easy, but definitely easier to tack on Zadina as part of another deal where you're moving your clearly more valuable to other teams' draft picks. But Yzerman didn't want to move the picks, so that's probably more so what had to do with it. But if you couldn't even tack Zadina on to appeal to other teams as a part of a package deal with some valuable draft picks, I know we're going to talk a little more about, we're going to go in and talk about what this could mean for a potential Debrincat trade, but I think that's, if nothing else, us included, it's a reality check to Red Wings fans who thought for sure Zadina was going to be a prime piece in a trade to bring in Debrincat. And now that we see that no team wanted him for nothing, that wasn't happening. That there was no chance of that.
So there's been a lot of buzz around Detroit on Steve Yzerman make the trade, and I found myself in this logical fallacy, I think is what you call it, where I kept saying yeah, Steve, you got to find a place for Zadina. You got to find a place for Veleno. You got to try to pair these guys up, put them with some picks. Maybe that's what gets the Debrincat trade done. And then I would also fall back, and whenever someone says why are we in year 5 and we're not making the playoffs? And I go, well, look who he had in his system. I was valuing Zadina and Veleno high in trade talks, and then on our team, I had him low. When in all reality, it was down here the entire time.
They were watching the same player we were.
Yep.
They were looking at the same stats we were.
So to anyone who's wondering why, personally, me as a Red Wings fan, I say I'm giving Steve a much longer leash, is that the players that he has brought in, or Ken Holland left him, can't even make it off waivers right now. That's how difficult of a position that he has been in. And I just want to point out, this is just to fight that argument again. I know we did a little bit before, but every move that Steve Yzerman has made, signing and drafting, has had a positive impact on this team. Whenever you're looking at something that isn't working out, other than Ned and the Vrana one, I'm not blaming Steve at all. We'll talk a little bit more about Vrana and how that links to what's happening with Zadina right now too. But I'm not blaming Steve at all with that. I know Zadina has to get waived again. I know that there are 2 waves of this, so maybe, just to play devil's advocate to us a little bit, maybe they'll go after him next time when, teams still have opportunities to sign Tarasenko. Maybe you don't want to take $2 million off your books to move forward, and you'd rather have Tarasenko than Zadina right now, especially if you're trying to make a run. But it is surprising no rebuilding teams took him either. And we did watch a bit of that Steve Yzerman press conference. And I think it was one of the most emotional ones that he's had. Like, it actually felt like he was showing his heart, showing a little frustration, but also like disappointment at the same time in the situation, because we're sitting here talking about how we can still, or like no one wants Zadina. Steve did. Steve signed him to a 3-year contract, and he just straight up said that. He's like, I signed him to a 3-year. I believe in him. I still think he can. Maybe, because that was before the waivers passed, maybe that's Steve trying to like bump up his value a little bit, because it seemed like he really respected Zadina. There was a positive relationship between the two. Maybe the request to trade like hurt a little bit, because these are still humans. Yeah, the 3-year deal, he said, might still be holding him back in Detroit. But if you compare this to like the situation with Verana, Steve's press conference afterwards was pretty hands off, pretty unemotional. Like, this is it. I wish him the best of luck moving forward. Wished it would have worked out here, and we move on. Which was a very similar situation. He was waived, no one took him, and then he was traded. And I understand why no one did. There was the who knows what may have happened, but it was not a good time to take on Verana. It was better to let him get through a system and find stability in his life, from our understanding. But Steve, I feel like, really likes Zadina, and Zadina doesn't want to be here. So it seemed like he just did right by his player by waiving Zadina.
Okay, so to move us to what we want to talk about with the maybe potential of there still being something in the future between the Red Wings and Ottawa regarding Debrincat. Now that we know a player like Zadina, who we clearly don't want or didn't want, they didn't want, that probably goes for the same as other players that I know you and I have mentioned in the past, like Veleno.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, what would it take? Is there any chance at this point that we could get something done? It sounds like what you were saying earlier. We definitely thought we had more in value than we really did. And now that the draft is over, Steve's not trading one of these rookies he just drafted. If he was going to trade anything regarding the draft, it would have been the picks either during or before the draft. So all that value is gone in terms of trade value. What's next? Like a Soderblom and Edvinsson, those are probably the guys that are on Ottawa's list, but there's no shot they're getting moved, right?
I would really hope not, but I wouldn't doubt that that's the asking price. It's things that we don't want to hear, things that I personally don't want to do, but it would be hard to say no to at this point. A big sign is that the Red Wings still have 9.9 in cap. That could roughly be a Debrincat salary after a trade. Steve has said that he's not done. There are still insiders linking Debrincat here. There are a couple things that have, prolonged this. And I personally believe that the longer that Debrincat's on the market, the better the chances are that he comes to Detroit. And just like a couple of those would be, like, insiders are still linking him. The Senators kind of fumbled at the start, not allowing the agent to talk to teams. I'm not sure how you're going to trade someone that needs to be signed as an RFA, and they can't even talk to the teams that are going to trade it. You're not going to get good offers. Especially when Debrincat also released a short list of teams that he said that he would sign long-term with. So if you're not one of those teams, you know that without talking to Debrincat, that he's not interested in signing long-term with you. And I think that holds a lot of power that we can move forward with. And how similar the Red Wings and the Senators are right now, just in the state of their organization, is huge on why they would not want to trade a great goal scorer to someone competing with them. If they are able to recognize, like, hey, the thing that we do better than Detroit is score goals, and, we're able to beat on them a little bit, and we have all of this offense that could be better than theirs, and, we beat them when it really mattered last year, why would they want to give us that player? I really wouldn't doubt if the Red Wings are the bottom, if not like bottom 3 teams that they would want to do it to, because it's within your division. It's not just like a team within your conference. You're like, okay, well, we're not directly competing them within the division. If you do the other conference entirely, it's a completely different price. So the Red Wings, I think, are just very, very clearly down at the bottom of that. And I want to talk about the power that Debrincat holds in these conversations. Is as an RFA, a team that might want him, if he says, I'm not going to sign long-term with you, that means that you're going to arbitration. And that's going to be very difficult to justify the high price that the Senators are asking for him. If you don't know if arbitration is going to give him a 2-year deal, did you just give up, 2 firsts and a second, or a great player involved in that, or a year or 2 option on a guy? That's really, really tough difficult to justify that buying price. And looking at the teams that he did list, you have to have the cap space to be able to sign him, even through arbitration, which is still going to be a hefty amount. If you look at Dallas, it's $580,000. Nashville has 8.7 mil. I think that's the most likely of them. Florida has 362,000. Vegas is negative 2.2 million. Not on his list, but the insiders have listed him, are the Islanders with 1 million. So of the teams that have shown the most interest in him, the Red Wings and the Predators are the most likely to be able to suit that need. And I give the edge in likelihood to Nashville, especially with what we saw them do through free agency so far. They are retooling. They're
going for it right now at this point. Given their division, their current situation,
yep,
you might as well go for it before Bedard wakes up and, hits his stride.
Yep, you have the Wild dropping out of that race, in my opinion. In Nashville, when they have Saros, a Vezina-level goaltender, they have a solid defense. They have Yossi. Like, you can easily just retool and find your way right back into the playoffs, and who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, the longer it takes, the more their options are exhausted. I'm not sure if any of those teams that we listed, they are also kind of in a win now mentality. So are they going to just shift out an $8 million contract to just sign a new $8 million contract and lose the draft capital at the same time to make that happen? It doesn't feel like it's lining up too much for everybody. And I think the Red Wings are probably the second most likely in the scenario to get them, depending on what Nashville's willing to give up.
I think there's a chance Ottawa goes into the season with Debrincat, maybe looks for something. Maybe they think they can get something, a desperate type offer when it comes to the trade deadline. And then they get a good chunk of the season where they have a goal scorer to put them in a good spot to make a playoff run. And if they can get the kind of return that they're clearly seeking now when it comes to the trade deadline, where teams might be a little more desperate to bring someone like him in, you think maybe they can get something there. But what teams are usually looking for a Debrincat at the trade deadline? It's probably a team that's making a push for that playoff spot as well. So if they're, if Ottawa's looking for comparable players that just want to play there, that's going to be a tough find in the middle of the season. So I think if Ottawa's looking for players that are comparable in terms of readiness and can make an impact right now, because, they're pretty neck and neck with where the Red Wings are in their rebuild, then it's going to have to be before the season with a team that, is looking to dish something like that up. But if they're looking for prospects, the Wings can definitely provide that. But I'm telling you right now, if you're a Wings fan and you find out, hey, the Wings traded some prospects for Debrincat, hold your breath, because it's not gonna feel good when you look and see what that trade ended up being. You're probably gonna see some names you don't want to see leave. So I guess it's gonna bring it to me. Or I don't know if you have more you wanted to hit before we close out, but if not, I kind of want to end it with a question of, if you find out that that's the answer and you're going to have to involve like an Edvinsson or a Soderblom or some other, some young names that you have high hopes on, do you want Debrincat? Are we close enough to where you think that would be worth it? Or is it not worth rolling the dice and just letting Steve cook? Let him keep bringing up his guys and just let the process continue.
That is such a tough situation. I think you would be able to get me in a conversation and convince me that I would be okay with sending Edvinsson or Soderblom. I would not send both. That would not happen. I truly believe in how great those two players can become. And I also recognize how great Debrincat is now and how much we need the Debrincat now. The player that I would like to see involved now, and again, this is going right back to our value of him might be real high and someone else's might be real low, and I'm pulling myself down here. I think that you would want to involve Robbie Fabry, not on a terrible contract, issue being injuries.
That's tough. That's a real tough ask to expect the team to move a guy like Debrincat for just about anyone who's injury prone, because every time Fabry gets injured at that point, you've, for the time being, received nothing in return, or significantly less in return for the guy you were clearly valuing very high when you were shopping him.
Yeah, I think that just kind of comes as like the cherry on top of the deal. I think again, if you're just making me try to put this together, you're probably doing a first next year, which, by the way, is what Ottawa said they expected in the deal. They did not expect a draft pick out of this class. They expected it next class. So that tells me all of the talks that they have been in involved next year picks. So,
you have to imagine the Boston pick is not high on their grocery list. Like that's probably going to be an early second.
They signed Lucic. They might just be phoning it in next year. It might be the last hurrah tour for Bergeron, maybe Krejci. Yeah. I don't know what he's doing. Lucic. Maybe it's the get the gang back together. We had the best season ever and the biggest disappointment of the playoffs ever. And
that Boston pick has a good chance of being an early second. Let's be honest.
Yeah, so it would have to be the Detroit pick for sure. And if I would probably say they'd want Soderblom.
And I want to do that sooner than later. I want more. I want to do that. I don't want to do that partway through the season or at the deadline. I want Debrincat's goals throughout the year so that at least, we win a little bit more on the deal when our pick isn't a top 10 pick.
But for the same reason why I said like other teams that might have the cap space, but he has not said that he wants to sign long term with him, is that really, like, I don't know how much GMs want to go to arbitration with players, especially a player of his caliber. What's going to be the fair value determined by a third party? I would be genuinely a little worried about it. What if they say, Johnny Gaudreau makes 9.5 mil, so now Debrincat should make 9.75? And you're like, I mean, there are arguments to be made for that. I'm sure someone could bring that up to the table and you'd be able to form a good argument for it. And then maybe if he says that he's going to go sign long-term with someone else, maybe you get him maybe around that 8.75 range, like kind of what we're paying Larkin right now, maybe a little higher. He is young. He wants the long-term contract. And the salary cap is just going up, so that wouldn't scare me at all to get him at that price for this team. I would love to pay that amount for him. But I think Red Wings fans are not prepared or will like the payment that we will have to do for it.
Wings fans won't be prepared, but you could be prepared by hitting the subscribe button. The next time the Wings do something smart or not so smart, maybe if the Debrincat gets moved, even if it doesn't go to Detroit, you'll definitely get a video out of us. So make sure you subscribe, maybe even hit like the video, if you feel like it. And we'll catch you guys in the next one. We'll be posting more on what the Wings do throughout the off season. Fingers crossed.
It's gonna be a good season.